Shall we play a game?
We got one person online. The workload is enough for like 10 users. I think we got a hacker.
Shall we play a game?
What are they doing to him? Breaking into his mind. It's like hacking a computer. All it takes is time.
Red alert! All hands to battle stations.
Hello, friend.
Welcome to Red Spy 365.
Shall we play a game?
Hey, so this is a quick test of whether, actually not really a quick test, I'm going to do a podcast if it works. The idea is that if I can, I don't know about you, but I try to do podcasts, I try to do it every day. But you know what, my house is crazy in the mornings. I mean, it gets less crazy as towards Christmas, which is kind of weird. I'm supposed to get more. But as it gets towards Christmas, things calm down a little bit. But it's been so hard to try and do things, I guess, continuously. So, the good news is, I'm doing a test to see, because one place I do have, which is a, sanctuary, is my car when I go to work in the mornings. Or, when I'm driving, something, like I'm doing a travel right now, it's a 5-hour drive. But the idea is that, I've got 5 hours. So I usually listen to audiobooks. Anyone wants a good cue, there was a recommendation. Was it Sandworm? That was a really good book. I forget who it is, but if you type in Sandworm, Cyber, it talks about it. So, I think it's a 12-hour audiobook. I'm kind of partially through it, but it's very cool. And, that's how kind of like I get around things. So from my perspective, if I can record podcasts in the car, this is going to be great. So I've been working on it, and hopefully I've got it all planned, and it all's going to work. Otherwise, I'm going to be talking for an hour, or probably about 30-40 minutes, and this will never see the light of day, because it just sounds terrible. Even though my voice right now is terrible, even though it's better most weeks. I don't know what's going on with me. Sounds like I'm, people keep saying, like, you sick? I'm like, no, I'm fine. My voice is just gone. I don't know why. It's not like I'm doing speaking engagements just recently, so I have no idea. Maybe I need to be quiet at times, but podcasts are kind of cool. It enables me to talk to the people, the Red Spy community, and talk about what's going on, which is really what people are interested in. Actually, I'll tell you what, another good thing. So, a couple of tests that I always do, and I always try and give tips. Local admin is always, domain. It's as good as domain admin to me at times. And from local admin, you can reuse that credential, because obviously people take a local admin account and they reuse that same credential elsewhere. And every now and then, you come up with something where you try something, you think, oh man, that's kind of cool how it works. That was pretty neat. And so just the other day I found that, I compromised a system, local admin account, hash. I could reuse that hash, found other hashes. And so, but obviously, for a defender, look at things like Microsoft Labs, the local admin password service. It just means you've got to extend some schemas and do a little bit of AD, but it tokenizes and puts an ACL on the lab system, on the actual local admin password, so that it's only unique to that particular system, and it stops that particular attack, from my perspective anyway. But the cool thing about that was, and how I found that, machines will never replace humans, and this is why we talk about bots and automating bots, but essentially it's always going to have a human interpretive part to it, was I saw a local admin account with a different name, but had a couple of characters in it that reminded me of a user in like a domain admin group. So obviously it's local admin group, I can see the domain admins, their group, domain admins / domain, gives me who's in there. And the name was kind of similar. So I took that hash, tried it with the domain admin, and it worked. This is why systems can never replace us. Because one, if it had just kept on trying to brute force and bang around on it, it would have locked out the account, because they had a quite low account lockout threshold. So this is why it's always important. I always believe that machines will never replace humans on its intuitive. Because just basically we can look at something and just go, let's just see, that just sounds something. Sounds a bit right. A bit of a gut feeling. one would call experience, but really it's just a gut feeling. It's not, or you could call it a lucky guess, one of the two, and I'm happy with either. But, it's really a case of, hey, just a gut feeling. Sometimes you sit there, you do your root dance, you're like, woo, that's cool. And you think, man, that's why a machine will never replace me. So that's one part. The other part, obviously, is kind of Red Spy, what we're doing. So, part and parcel, obviously, doing a lot of things. You integrate into Intel 471. If you don't know about Intel 471, go check them out. They're like the cybercrime intelligence specialists. And the neat thing, what we're doing is we're taking, I always turn around and say, like, the most important part, and one of the good things about Red Spy is we give that insight time and, the value. In other words, you find out the bad things that are wrong with your security posture quicker than you would do testing once a year. So with Red Spy continuous testing, ideally you find out, hey, look, our risk posture's changed, and, we immediately notify you. However, with sort of like threat intelligence, and bearing in mind, like, all my team are Intel analysts, we're able to sit there and look at the intelligence feeds and even automatically start mapping the intelligence feeds to the data set that you have. When I talk about data set, that's the data that's specific to you. In other words, what ports, services, vulnerabilities you have. That's your data set specific to you. Or we can take your data set and map it to these, cybercrime threat reports or threat intelligence and databases, and actually start to talk about, okay, we've seen, CVE X or, CVE 10, and in the underground they're talking about a proof of concept with CVE 10. So maybe now we're not just talking about, this is your risk posture, but this may be talking about this is your potential risk posture. So we're now starting to predict, potential changes to your risk posture in the future, as well as maybe some chatter about your industry, maybe some chatter about yourself. Maybe you've got a keyword that's looking for your organization. And bearing in mind, this is closed source intelligence. So this isn't stuff that, you could just grab off of, some Google forum. This is people on the inside, as it were. So that's the most important part of that is, look, this isn't no OSINT, this isn't open source intelligence. This isn't driven by being able to search in certain forums. These are sort of places like, you're looking at guys on the inside of like Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp, those kind of groups, sort of technologies where, it's closed, that you have to be invited into, you have to be one of the gang. Imagine you've got an insider right on the inside of the organization being able to feed you information about what's going on. And not just one, these guys have like 185. And on top of which, I don't speak Russian very well. So these guys have like translators, Russian forums. I mean, there's no point in me searching through it, even an open source Russian forum, because at the end of the day, I don't speak Russian, so I'd have no use whatsoever. However, if you've got, intelligence analysts that can translate and feed that information to you, then that's great. And it really is starting to look for not just, the changes in your threat risk, but maybe some precursors to what's going on in the industry, or maybe what's going on to starting to attack. It's really important. In fact, there's some great reads on the internet, and you just look at how people use this closed source intelligence to identify precursors for attacks on them. And you can even get indicators of compromise rules, JARA rules, all kinds of different rules that you can add into your IPS IDS. So it's kind of interesting. It's something that we're integrated into. So we've got 12.5. 5th of December is when 13.3.2 gets released. So I get it in my hands, we do some testing, make sure everything runs, and then we'll try and sort of release it as soon as. We try to be the Tesla of updating and upgrading. This one's going to be a bit different because it's an integration into somebody else's company. So we may ask a couple of dollars, and I said, just look at how much they would normally cost and compare with what we're going to come out with, and you'll be really super surprised how we do it. So I'm really excited to be integrated into these kind of threat feeds. We've always talked about it, and we've done it. The other part is, we've done a lot more heavier work on the web application side of things. So kudos to some of the vendors we have out there that feed information back to us, what their requirements are, because we've really done some work there to take their recommendations and sort of feed it into them, and hopefully we've done what they requested. We have the roadmap, anybody. I tried to send the roadmap out to you all. I think some are just not interested. Some are interested. Some it's kind of pleasantly, mild, interesting read. Others are like super into it. And so we see these different levels of engagement. I always tell people we are a community. If you see something, you need something, tell me. We'll add it into it. We'll do our best to integrate. I think the other thing we've talked about, obviously, is, in fact, we've got 13.3.2 coming up. Then we go into 13.4, and then there's a short 13.5. So, one of the other things we're doing is the user interface. You'll see, you'll be able to try a beta of the user interface in 13.3.2, which is the 5th of December. So you'll be able to see where we're sort of direction we're going. And it starts to walk through some wizards. Why are wizards important? Because it enables you to do some things as well. I mean, bearing in mind we are a service, like we said, we can do everything, but some people want to have that interaction, that wizardry interaction, and of course it is complex what we do. I mean, no one's denying it's complex to be a pen tester. I mean, my design is not to turn you into pen testers, because that's what we do. My design is to sit there and sort of, hey, I want to answer some of the questions of like, what if? Okay, there's the latest X out there, or there's a latest thing that we want to be able to do. Are we vulnerable? You can always ask us. Yes, no. But some companies, they just they have red teams, they've got more security mature staff, and they want to be able to try it out. So, like I said, if you're the kind of company that just is, or the kind of community guy that's just hands off completely, no problem. Keep the same as. But if you are more into hands on, getting integrated into this, getting more visible, getting more visibility into what we do, or maybe playing with it, then obviously, you're going to start to see some interesting features come up. One of which, obviously, what I've always mentioned is the 14.15. That to me is like super important, because Gartner's talking about, I like to do quotes, but they're talking about application security. By about 2022, they're saying about 50 to 60% is going to be crowdsourced. And I think there is need for a crowdsource model. I mean, it's great. But I think right now the crowdsource model suffers. One, I know who the company is that's being tested. Obviously you've got verified testers, and there's a verification process that goes through that, which is good. But also, it's a many pen tester to one company relationship. Whereas what we're working towards in the 14.15, which is building scenarios, crowdsource scenarios, which means a pen tester can build a scenario and sell the scenario to the Red Spy marketplace, and have multiple, have that single scenario available to multiple clients. The good thing about that is that the client that purchases the scenario or uses the scenario doesn't, the guy that creates it, in other words, the content creator we call them, those content creators that create the scenarios will never know, well, they don't have to know, it can be anonymous, will never know who purchased that scenario. That's a good thing, because you don't now know who's using it. I mean, there's a nice air gap there. It kind of gets into the question of, and I had this great discussion with someone the other day, I won't mention who, but it's, hackers. Is it just that they're just evil, they're bad people, or is it just, it's a business model? Hey, you have a weakness, we exploit the weakness. And, isn't that most, organizations or most businesses, or, they're trying to help you, but they're identifying a weakness, maybe they're marketing to you, whereas these, bad guys, obviously, bad actors, they go out and ransomware you or do whatever, but is it necessarily that they're particularly targeting you, or is it just a business model? Hey, this is how we make money. What if we change that model? What if we were brave enough to turn around and say, okay, hold on a second, carry on doing what you do, carry on writing the bad malware, the bad scenarios, but rather than weaponize certain aspects of it, this just have it so that when you do execute, you're executing in my environment, my ecosystem. So, I'm going to take a step back. Imagine the analogy of the Apple iPhone and the App Store. So the content creators that build the scenarios, these guys are creating the apps for the App Store. The Red Spy delivery system, the content, the portal, that kind of thing, the actual portal that people log into, that is the delivery system. That is the iPhone. So right now, I think we have the iPhone. I think Red Spy, we're kind of seeing some super neat things that we're doing with it, and I'd love to show you, talk about the roadmap at a later episode. But we're adding a lot of features, a lot of feedback, a lot of requests, and that is the delivery mechanism, and it's solid. It does what it says on the tin. The other aspect is, this is where we're starting to work on this content creation, this crowdsourced content creation. So we separated that into two things, really, or three things, and I'll talk about that now. One is you have the marketplace. To have the marketplace, you've got to have a software development kit, which is essentially the scenario builder, more enhanced version of the scenario builder. So they can create the scenarios. They don't necessarily have to have the tools. They can create the tools and upload them to the marketplace with the scenarios, and we validate the tools. And those tools can either be local tools, in other words, installed locally on the system, or they could be called Docker tools. Now, if you guys aren't into Docker containers right now, again, the technology is awesome. You're creating a Docker container that we can load up to a Kubernetes infrastructure running on an AWS instance. Why do we want to do that? Why would that even be remotely interesting to me? Well, imagine you've got a remote admin tool that's a GUI, and you're creating. You want to run 5 scenarios that run multiple rats, and they all want to run on port 80 and 443, because don't forget, maybe that's the only egress that you can get out of an organisation. They're doing egress filtering. So you want to run all these rats on these ports, plus you want to be able to spin up these tools and be able to expand the images and be able to expand people accessing those and make the whole thing scalable. Then Kubernetes and the containerization, Docker containerization, is the only way you can do that, really, with like ingress controllers and URL directing. So when people click on a link, it directs to the actual Docker image running in the Kubernetes cluster that you click on. That way you can run multiple rats, connect them all up, and all have them running on port 80 and 443, and the URL will decide which tool to connect to. This is how the ingress controllers work. It's about as technical as this is going to get, because really behind the scenes is where the magic happens. And I tell people, this is no problem with explaining how the magic happens, but essentially we want people to be able to create scenarios, put it to the marketplace using the most latest cutting edge sophisticated tools that they can ever possibly create, but have that scenario only ever work in a Red Spy ecosystem, in which case you could create the most malicious kind of scenarios you can think of, but again, it's only going to be working for the power of good. It's going to be working to justify, and to work out how to make a company better. Because, so we're taking the power of crowdsourcing, mapping it to, sort of the delivery mechanism of Red Spy, so that you could just sit there, and there's a whole business process behind this as well, but it means that essentially you'll have access to the latest tools, latest cutting edge tools. Because the problem we have is, if I continue to use pen testing tools, that's good. But guess what? AV vendors and there's so much you have to do to the actual pen testing tools to make them not found by AV vendors, because AV vendors knows what tools pen testers use. Therefore, it's easy to go after pen testers and block pen testers. And in essence, since pen testers should be mimicking the bad guys, you're going to get a clean bill of health. But the problem is, it's not necessarily the latest and greatest technique or tool, because if it was, then the AV vendors would be automatically building it. Essentially, what we're trying to create is that fantastic ecosystem that uses sophisticated tools that are being, crowdsourced. It's a lot to take in at times. Again, I just take that one step back and say iPhone analogy. Red Spy is the iPhone. The marketplace is going to be, the App Store. The idea being that we're going to be able to build sophisticated scenarios, and it's a scenario, not just a specific vulnerability. It's a pure scenario So I love it when you see a lot of crowdsourced platforms, you know, they really target an application or they target a technology. And in reality, you know, if you mirror this to the cyber, you know, again, this is, you know, go back to the cybercrime, what's going on there with the, you know, the threat feeds that we're seeing, it's not the real world. I mean, sure, you know, it helps you, it protects a certain aspect of an organization, but it's not holistic enough and it's not mapping to what the real world is doing. And so, you know, I'm really trying to map it to what the real world is doing, but I've got to be able to scale it. So scalability comes with like the Kubernetes stuff and the Docker, especially for the GUI tools and the tool server. So the idea being that, you know, we have this scalability. I need to have that there. Got to. But at the same time, I'm not going to be creating thousands of tools myself or thousands of techniques. That has to be crowdsourced, and you have to reward these content creators. Remember sort of like 10 years ago when you would get like, you know, you was just looking for the kudos from the community that you done something really cool? That's gone. And at the end of the day now, it's monetized. You've got to be able to put value. And that's great. I think that the thing about that is the market decides the value of the scenario. You know, so if someone wants to market a scenario really high and people, you know, say it's rubbish, and, you know, the reviews say it's rubbish, then guess what? The marketplace will decide whether other people are going to buy it. You know, so, you know, we know there's obviously got to be validation in the tools, validation in the scenarios, and, you know, that's one good way of working on things. But I think you'll like what we're doing. I think it's pretty sophisticated. I think the scalability's there. The proof of concept is sitting there. You know, we're looking at the marketplace, the tool server, the SDK, which is the, you know, software development kit to be able to build scenarios without all the tools. And a lot of what we've done, it already exists. It's there. You know, we've got it. You know, we've literally written it all up. It's done. It's dusted. We've just got to start doing a simple, you know, POC and then scale it up onwards. Because once we start building one part, it becomes a lot easier. You know, you'll see how it translates to everybody else. The only question I have is whether, you know, we do centralized tool servers or whether we move the tool servers and distribute them to the federated system. And I'll probably look like it's going to be more a centralized tool server. That's going to help you because you'll see, and you'll see the visualizations that we're going on because we're going to make the repository, the repo system, and then once we get all the scenarios in, and you've got it, you know, you've got all these scenarios sitting in place, so you're able to pick and choose scenarios, or automatically they're going to be chosen based upon your data set, or automatically suggested to you based upon your data set. Then that's when we start looking at implementing the decision support system and some of the more advanced machine learning. Because now we can have the system start selecting them for us, or maybe looking at other scenarios, maybe altering the scenario till it wins. This is really where you've got to get to. I think, you know, when you run continuously, you have to get to that. You know, one-offs, I mean, I still do one-offs. You know, and I talk to companies about it, and, you know, there is a valid way, there's a valid reason to have a one-off test. But to me, it's not, I don't believe it's the future. I think, you know, and I don't believe it's emulation, I don't believe it's simulation. I think, you know, what we do with scenarios is partial emulation, but we're actually taking the real world and crowdsourcing it. So it's, I guess we just, you know, we're not emulating the hackers, we're using their knowledge. We're taking from the crowd, you know, we're doing it from crowdsourcing, maybe from the universities, maybe from, you know, the colleges. We've got some interest in some of these universities that want to talk about what we do or how we're going to do that, because that's, you know, quite fascinating. In a sense, you're trying to, in fact, I was just reading recently, there was a guy that got arrested for writing a RAT, you know, remote admin tool, and he was distributing it and selling it on the underground. And I was thinking to myself, man, it's kind of, okay, I get it, you know, it sucks. And, you know, he obviously was, there's probably more to the story. If I'd read it a bit deeper, he was probably trying to sell it to bad guys or maybe help bad guys. But, you know, again, emulation, simulation, it's like a knife. You know, a knife can be used to cut a potato, or it can be used for bad purposes. So, you know, same with rats. But wouldn't it be great if you can give an outlet? Because they're not going to stop building things, really, are they? I mean, no one's going to stop building rats or building malicious things. You know, they're just going to take those malicious things and reuse them elsewhere. use them for bad people. Maybe the only people that were built by them is bad people. Maybe they're trying to sell it to both. But if you could take that and take those kids or take those guys that are building this sophisticated stuff and say, look, I've got a better way of doing it. Sell it in my ecosystem. If you sell it in my ecosystem, you'll probably get better rewards. And at the end of the day, you're not going to get arrested. You're not going to have the feds and the FBI coming around knocking on your door because you're trying to do it for good things. So, again, I think it's the ability to be able to take things and make them better. Isn't there a song about that in Hey Jude? Take a sad song and make it better. But at the end, what we're trying to achieve is being able to put much more sophisticated attacks into the systems that maybe we couldn't even think of it. I always tell people there's some super smart kids out there, there's some super smart people. We need to tap into that crowdsource and actually reward these content creators. So that's where the 1415 goes, and you've seen me harp on about it before, but this is a bit of a refresh because I've done a number of things since the last podcast, for sure. One of which obviously has been sort of getting into the weeds, building this stuff now. So we're not just at the point where, hey, this is a hypothetical. We're now going through the process of, hey, look, this is how it's going to do it. Not just the pseudocode, but this is exactly down to the nuts and bolts of how this is going to work and how this is going to be, integrated into Red Spy in the future. So what else has been happening in the big bad wide world? Well, we've seen a number of vulnerabilities. It's kind of weird. You're still seeing the community reluctant to release some of the really super exciting stuff when it comes to like Bluekeep and some other vulnerabilities. Even Bluekeep I'm seeing right now is like, as a pen tester, it's a really flaky exploit. If you don't get it right, it blue screens. And my first mantra is do no harm. As a pen tester, we try to do no harm, but bearing in mind that, if you've got an application that if I press the spacebar 5 times it blows up, I have no idea. It's when people say to me, can you guarantee that you'll never, cause the server to reboot? No, I have no idea. Like I said, press the spacebar 5 times in a username field and it reboots the server. I have no idea what's hidden there. The only way I can guarantee that is to never send you a packet. The idea is, though, that I'm not going to be doing things that are super malicious. I will try and keep away from things that potentially could break things. And this is why, even on the subsets of the continuous Red Spy system, we'd rather point things out than actually break. And that doesn't mean that, if we see something and it's stable, and we say, look, can we go beyond that because we want to see beyond, the first onion layer? Because obviously, just taking the analogy that I had, where I got on the local admin system and I was able to reuse that hash. Obviously, the first exploit was the MS-1710, gained access to the system. Now, if I stopped there and said, okay, you need to patch that, I would never have found out some other things that they were doing. Sort of password reuse. We would never been able to talk about how restriction of PowerShell, those kind of things. So sometimes it is better to go beyond the first onion layer because we're trying to do as much as we can in the time limit we have. Obviously, in continuous, we get much more of a time limit. So even at that point, we might be able to say, look, is there a good time that we can do this that isn't going to, impact massively upon you? Maybe it's a time when, we want to be able to. It's a quiet time. You don't want to be testing or doing those kind of things on accounting companies or banks when it's tax time. The same way that maybe it's a quieter time we can do this just to show that defense in depth, because we do want to be able to achieve certain things. So there's the Bluekeep one's pretty fascinating to me because I don't get it. We're meant to be, and I was listening to 2600 and I agree with him. Sometimes if responsible disclosure is good. I'm always for responsible disclosure. But what happens if they don't do nothing? You tell the company and then nothing happens. And so, I think Emmanuel was talking about, hey, look, it's got to be open. Otherwise, the only people that have it are the bad guys. So it's interesting. I mean, it's the world we live in is kind of fascinating, isn't it? At the best of times. So there's a lot going on in the news, and of course, we're starting to see a lot of interesting things, especially happen in security. I mean, this is when I talk about interesting things. You see the T-Mobile US hacked. And to be honest, that was, I know the UK one had a bit of an issue as well, but the problem is always there. There's also now, for those that use VNC, there's now 37 security holes in VNC. So I love the terminology. RDP loves company. So if you use VNC in any way, shape or form, then guess what? Welcome to the world. This is why we don't like to expose these things, publicly, because people go to exploit them. This is why ports like 3389 or 5901, VNC type stuff, you don't want to be exposing it publicly. So look at ways to be able to restrict that. If you want to look at something like guacamole even. So I would always make sure. We've seen an increase back to Bitcoin mining. I don't know if the ransomware was getting a little bit too hot and heavy. Maybe the heat was getting on some of these cyber criminals. But we have seen an interest, people moving back to some of the Bitcoin mining again. So we've had one big hack again, T-Mobile US. I'm trying to find out really more information about what really happened. I mean, it just looked like it was a customer site. It was more a case of, personal information being compromised again. Like, we haven't seen that before. But the other one was, we're starting to see sort of, well, to be honest, we're seeing both, aren't we? We're seeing ransomware and Bitcoin. Maybe that's wrong. Because, Louisiana was just hit with ransomware as well. And so we're starting, for one thing, if you're a state organisation, you seem to be in the crosshairs right now. We definitely seem to be targeting, the state organisations, hospitals, those kind of things. But we're also, I think, also seeing that Bitcoin mining. So in a sense, they're starting to do dual things. But maybe I was wrong when I said that ransomware is not as prevalent, because I'm still seeing it, I guess. And I know on the marketplace we're still seeing it. So, or in the chatter. So I just think that we're seeing this resurgence a little bit more in Bitcoin mining as well. I don't know. Maybe the Bitcoin's going up in price. Anyway, that's enough from me. So hopefully, this works, and I don't have a huge noise background from the car or anything else. And if it does work, I can really start doing these again. So hey, thanks very much, and thanks for listening.
Shall we play a game?
We got one person online. The workload is enough for like 10 users. I think we got a hacker.
Shall we play a game?
What are they doing to him? Breaking into his mind. It's like hacking a computer. All it takes is time.
Red alert! All hands to battle stations.
Hello, friend.
Welcome to Red Spy 365.
Shall we play a game?